The other side are the people in Wall Street that were trying to figure out, in this desperate collapse that contemporary capitalism was facing, who was going to save them and how it was going to be done. And they were putting pressure immediately on Obama.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Good evening. Or as my friends at Occupy Chicago have been telling me to say, mic check. Come on, you guys have to do better than that. Mic check. Okay, this is. I'm a graduate student, so this is a learning experience for everybody. It's a teachable moment, right? Like I said. So, as Stan introduced me, my name is Toussaint Losier, and first I have to say that I'm very honored to be here. And I want to thank all the folks who helped organize and put on this event, because the work that they do behind the scenes, making sure that everything is the way that it should be logistically, and putting together the programs, making sure the food is catered and prepared, folks who are going to serve the food, and make this all possible. The work that they do is very important. So if we could give them a round of applause. And particularly, I want to say thank you to all those people who reminded me that I needed to be here this evening, and reminded me what the time was, and called me and texted me, and I think even sent me some Facebook messages. So it's because of them that I'm here. So special thanks to them. I just want to say briefly a couple things to just highlight how significant it is that we're here this evening, not only to honor the people in particular that we're honoring, but really appreciating the human rights work that gets done in so many parts of the city and this country that gets unrecognized. This is, there's a saying that goes, may you live in interesting times. And I think we don't really sort of take stock of it, but we are living in very, very interesting times. I was here at the last Human Rights Awards dinner with Caroline and Ryan from the Chicago Anti-Eviction Campaign. And if I think back at everything that's happened over the past year, there's been a lot of really amazing developments that, unless you sort of take a moment to think about it, can pass you by. Last year, obviously in September, you had the emergence of Occupy Wall Street, which for those of us who've been working around issues of economic justice or any sort of raising concerns about the sort of corporate control of politics in this country, or even people who've been just shouting at their television, like, really? Did they just do that? Did they just say that? Like, does that really make sense? Whatever your criticisms or concerns about the way Occupy Wall Street is operating, what's happened in terms of shifting the national conversation about who's the 99%, who's the 1%, has been fundamental, and hopefully it's a shift that we'll see over to come, for years to come. The people I knew really just talked about the 85% and the 5%, right? Not the 99% and the 1%. So it's been an interesting development. Beyond that, we've seen really, for those of us who work related to the criminal justice system and incarceration, particularly the folks who organize this event, it can sometimes feel like it's like you're working at the plow, and it feels kind of lonely at times, right? It feels kind of isolated, and you're just sort of in your own lane, doing the work that you see needing to happen, and just sort of waiting for some sort of spark to carry things forward. And I think over the past year, we've seen really quiet but interesting developments take place. Prisoners across the country have been, of all things, using hunger strikes as a way to bring attention to their demands, simple demands around greater access to educational material, challenging solitary confinement, whether it's in Ohio, most recently, but in California, the California prison strike, have really started to make some change. And obviously, most recently, we've seen the protests that happened around the Trayvon Martin case, and those that have called for justice for Trayvon Martin. And I think it's that is an example of some sort of desire, particularly among young people, to try and find a way to fight back against racial profiling, try to find a way to fight back against what do they call it? The school, the prison pipeline, to fight back against come again?
Schoolhouse to jailhouse.
Schoolhouse to jailhouse track. And it's not happened in a way that's, you know, that's simple or that makes sense at first, but we really see young people, particularly in this country, trying to cry out and find a way to bring attention to the issues that confront them on a daily basis. So I study history, in part inspired by the fact, or what Malcolm X most famously said, of all our studies, history is best suited to reward our research. Right? If we study history, it provides us an opportunity to try and figure out how to change what's going on today. And I think one of the things that's interesting is, even in this past year, we've seen really amazing kind of historical transformations that are taking place. And for those of us who are doing this work, who have been pushing things forward for decades, this is a moment that we really need to start taking advantage of. So, without too much further ado, without any more lecturing from the professoriate, I want to take a moment to introduce our musical selection. We're very blessed to have folks who are going to really try to connect some of the concerns that bring us into this room in terms of issues of social justice, issues of human rights, to really the kind of the basic kind of cultural work, the basic kind of like, I don't know if I can call it soul music to some degree, that really is not just about feeding your head and your mind for the struggle, but also about feeling this, fueling the spirit and the heart as well. So without further ado, if we could have, and correct me if I mispronounce it, Ugochi? Ugochi, say, okay, that's right. Ugochi and who? Right?
Yeah, the group is
Afro Soul Ensemble? All right, pronounce that correctly. If we could have a round of applause for Ugochi and Afro Soul Ensemble. Come on, you guys have a little round. There we go.
Hi, everybody. Now, that's a little better. Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me now? Yes. All right, well, I just would like to say thank you for having us. Today was wonderful. Eating was good. And we just really are blessed and grateful to be here today. So we're going to do a couple songs for you. All of these songs are original, and basically we created it with our activism in mind and trying to, put a little bit forward for what we believe in. So, thank you. And then we're gonna hold it, and then we're gonna blow it out really slow. Okay? And then you're gonna settle in and just feel just the relaxation. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3, take a deep breath from the diaphragm and hold it. Now breathe it out. Okay, this is not Facebook. I hope you're doing this with me. We're gonna do it again. Take a deep breath. And hold it. Breathe it out. Ooh, I need that. Okay, this is our last one. Because you know, as revolutionaries in the struggle, you need to decompress too. You know, you take all the pressures of the world on. So what we're gonna do is take that deep breath. And hold it. Now breathe it out. Ooh, yeah. You better let it all go. Come on and let it all go. Let it all go. Don't hold on anymore. You better let it all go. It's gonna feel you for sure. You better let it all go. Let it all go. And breathe. You better let it all go. Don't hold on anymore. You better let it all go. It's gonna feel you for sure. You better let it all go. And breathe. Yeah.
That was nice. That was nice. So we're gonna bring them. That was so nice. We're gonna bring them back on later on in the program. But now we're gonna get into some of what you all have been waiting for, which is me speaking again, right? No, seriously, we are we're very blessed to honor the 4 Human Rights Awards recipients that we have tonight. We're going to have individual mentors in some instances, comrades in other instances, colleagues, close friends, bring on each one of the award recipients just as a way to kind of give us a little bit of a more personal introduction to some of the people who we're all here to celebrate. First of all, I want to welcome up Dr. Lisa Brock, who is the Academic Director of the Arcus Center for Social Justice Leadership at Kalamazoo College. And for those of you who don't know, don't have the pleasure of knowing Dr. Brock, she's a very particular and insistent person, and she wanted me to make sure that I noted the fact that she joined the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression in 1977. I don't want to tell you all how old I was in 1977. I don't want to embarrass myself and show my age. But she's been in the struggle for a long time, and she has the pleasure and the honor of introducing our first Human Rights Award recipient. So, Dr. Brock.
Thank you. Dara told me that 1977 was the year before she was born, so it's all good, as they say. Thank you, Toussaint, and I'm glad you're here with us and not in jail. I'm really thrilled to be here tonight to introduce my dear friend and amazing sister, Dara Cooper. You know how it is when you know someone so well and have spent so much time with them over time that you can't remember when exactly you met them, or when there was a time when they were not a part of your life. That is how I feel about Dara. I do remember her asking me at some point in the early 2000s if I would be her mentor. I told her no, because I wasn't going to take her to no stinking baseball games or buy her popcorn or none of that kind of stuff. And so she laughed. But what has happened is that we've become each other's mentor. And she has become my mentor. I think there is this notion that mentoring only goes one way, from the old to the young. But that is not the case. We older organizers have a lot to learn from the young ones. And I have surely learned a tremendous amount about organizing, about courage, and about myself from Dara. While she is here tonight being awarded for her most recent human rights work and the Human Rights Award for her work in food justice, I came to know Dara well when she graciously took on the task of heading up the National Hands Off Assata birthday campaign in 2006. She literally, with very little funds and no staff, organized groups of volunteers in 8 cities across the country to celebrate and raise consciousness about Assata Shakur's case. Working with, just to give you an example, working with a city council member in Detroit, under Dara's leadership, we even succeeded in having July 16th, Assata's birthday, named Assata Shakur Day by the City Council of Detroit. And then she, Mike, Toussaint, and I see Prudence over there, and Nicole got busy creating RISA, the Rise Up, oh, I said Mike. Are you pointing at Mike? Okay, and Mike. I said Mike, I thought I did. Don't mess with me, don't mess with me. They got busy creating RISA, Rise Up in Solidarity with Haiti Committee here in Chicago. They did great grassroots work in solidarity here, in solidarity with grassroots organizers in post-earthquake Haiti. When RISA realized that the Red Cross gave only a small portion of what they raised for Haiti, actually to Haitian relief, they made it public. After a demonstration in front of their downtown office, it was Dara who was invited in to have a discussion with the executive director. While that policy was not changed and hasn't changed, we don't think, the Red Cross was put on notice that RISA and Dara Cooper was watching. And then to her current passion, food justice in the Black community. Dara, as the project manager for Fresh Moves, has made this one-year-old nonprofit such a success that she and it are being featured in films and on news stories across the country. And it's being seen as a model for other types of food justice work in terms of taking food into food deserts and in communities that don't have grocery stores. In fact, she told me that while they did it not expecting to make a profit, they actually did make a small profit right from the beginning, which illustrates that Black folks on the west side of Chicago want to eat healthy, organic foods. But also, Dara is a 360-degree organizer. When the bus was set up, Dara made sure that folks from the west side worked on the bus on the west side. She made sure that wherever she could, she was teaching along the way. And she has just recently developed youth programs on healthy lifestyles and eating on the bus as they move around. This human rights awardee is an organizer's organizer. She's a feminist and a revolutionary. And I am super proud to offer one of this year's Chicago Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression Awards to Ms. Dara Cooper.
And I have a few words to say, but obviously I can't say how much I love, admire, respect, appreciate Dr. Lisa Rock in my life and all of my mentors here. So also I want to just do a little bit of an adjustment and say that with Fresh Moves, the work that I do now, with RZA, with all of that, it is always a collective of people who, and it takes a lot of us to do the work that we do. So while I'm so appreciative of receiving the award, it's always a collective and a lot of people doing a lot of amazing work. So just really quickly, a friend of mine said something that kind of struck me and he was congratulating me about this award. He congratulated me and said that he found it intriguing that I fight and work so hard for strangers, which I thought was interesting because I never thought of my work as for strangers. And he actually said this in reference to the Hands Off Asada campaign initially. But so especially when I coordinated that campaign, it was for a shero, not a stranger, a friend of a dear friend of mine. But more than anything, it was to stand up for someone whose example helped to liberate my imagination of what is possible for our people. Assad Shakur being liberated from maximum security prison taught me and continues to teach me that we can defy what seems to be insurmountable odds, that we don't have to be prisoners, and we can live. As we organize and resist, I know that Haiti, the other example of defying insurmountable odds through the Haitian Revolution, Haiti doesn't have to be colonized by NGOs, vultures like the Red Cross, and pimps like Bill Clinton and Monsanto. So as we continue to organize and resist, our people don't have to be lined up block by block, frisked, harassed, incarcerated, dehumanized, under relentless attack. Our people don't have to be underemployed, disempowered, disenfranchised on the massive levels that exist. As we organize, our people don't have to live overall substandard lives, eating substandard food of fried and dyed and overprocessed dead, things that are destroying our bodies and our minds. Our people don't have to struggle with diabetes and rampant rates of heart disease and obesity. We can liberate our bodies, our minds, ourselves, and our possibilities. Asada teaches me that. My comrades teach me that, and most importantly, my mentors, you all, teach me that, to stand up, to be smart, because you all are absolutely some of the smartest people I know, to resist, and whether we win or not in any particular struggle to keep on. And so I just really want to thank you for all of the inspiration that you all have continued to be for me and for our struggle. So thank you so much.
Okay, so next, we have the pleasure of bringing back up again our musical treat for the evening, Ugochi, and the Afro Soul Ensemble. Is that Afro Soul? Okay, I'm just checking myself. The Afro Soul Ensemble, who are going to bless us with one more song. If you guys can put your hands together. I'm not going to ask you to put your hands in the air, you can just put them together.
Thank you. I just would like to congratulate all the award nominees again, all the great work you're doing. And thank you again on behalf of the band and myself for having us. This song is basically an ode to my home country. And anyone who has been away from a place, sometimes, you know, when you live abroad and you can't go home, you feel almost like an incarcerated person, somebody who, you know, is separated from that place that they love. So this is my song to Nigeria. Like he's
Ugochi and the Afro Soul Ensemble. All right, now we're, I mean, this has all been the main event, right? This has all been, there's really not been an undercard for this whole evening. But now we do have the pleasure of bringing on our guest speaker for the evening. If we can, have a round of applause for Bill Fletcher Jr., live and in person.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm really happy to be here. I'm very honored to have been asked to speak with you this evening. And I want to start by saying Happy Cinco de Mayo. And I want to offer my congratulations to the award recipients. I want to offer special congratulations to Frank Rosen, for who I met a number of years ago, who offered me a place to stay when I came here to speak, and has always greeted me warmly and as a comrade ever since. I also want to especially thank Sister Clarice Durham. When she contacted me to invite me to do this, it became very clear very quickly there was no saying no. But what was also amazing is that people say that I respond very quickly on email. I couldn't believe how quickly she responded. I mean, some people with email, it's like you would not believe it's electronic. It's sort of, you send a message and then it's like communicating with Pluto or something, right? But with Clarice, it was like, send a message, come back. And I very much appreciated that. So here's the dilemma. Clarice asked me to speak and sort of give kind of the total analysis of the world. And you know, when I put together what she was really saying, it really came down to that. It's like tell us everything that's going on. And I'd love to, except it is 9:05. And one of the things you have to understand about me, it's very, very important, and I always have to do this as a public service announcement, is that I become homicidal when people fall asleep in front of me. It's just, you know, it's one of those irresistible impulses, you know? So at 9:05, it's like to give this kind of analysis, it's like, oh no, danger, Will Robinson, right? So I'm gonna try to do something, I'm gonna try to summarize some things here. I'm going to try to talk some about the moment that we're in, some about the issue of inequality, and finally about the fight for power. But I want to start with this. In January 1944, Allied troops stuck in southern Italy made a strategic decision German forces had the Allied forces stuck. They weren't really moving north of a place called Salerno. And the Allies came up with this brilliant idea, which was to go around the German lines and carry out an amphibious assault on a place called Anzio. And they carried this out in January 1944. And when they landed in Anzio, the Germans were completely surprised, completely. Resistance was minimal. Anzio was about 30 miles away from Rome. So they land there, and there was nothing to stop the Allied troops from getting to Rome, probably within a day. But they stopped. And they sat there on the beach and consolidated their positions. The Germans under Field Marshal Kesselring understood clearly what was going to happen, and all these German troops moved in and surrounded Anzio and blocked the Allies until June of 1944. Had they moved in January 44, they could have captured Rome within 2 days. But instead, they followed the path of caution. Instead, they landed and followed traditional military techniques. You know, you consolidate, you get your supplies together, etc., not understanding that the moment was a moment to move on Rome. In November 2008, we landed on Anzio. And we landed and completely surprised the other side. No matter what the pollsters said, clearly if Fox News was shocked, almost to the point of mass suicide, you know they were stunned. They did not know what to do. The political right did not know in November 2008, or December 2008, or January 2009, or February 2009. They did not know what to do. And yet, in landing in our version of Anzio, the administration sat back to consolidate its position. And instead of, in our version, moving on Rome and destroying the enemy, they sat and proceeded on caution. They decided that they had to do what traditional politicians do: consolidate their position, appeal to the so-called independent voters, extend a hand to the other side instead of smashing the opponents. But the problem wasn't just our commanders, it was us. Because we landed on Anzio too, right? We were waiting for the generals to say, start marching. Generals to say, no, we have to consolidate. And we say, okay, let's dig our trenches, get more sandbags, bring up more food, and let's just sit here and wait for the order to march on Rome. And the other side, with their version of Field Marshal Kesselring, surrounded us and mounted a counter-assault. And day after day, our contemporary version of the 88s were hitting us. In our version, it was the birthers, or it was the Tea Party, or it was constant barrages from Fox News, racist assaults, various kinds of divisive assaults, day after day after day, and we sat. We sat and did not challenge the generals. We didn't say, we've got to march quickly on Rome because we will lose the moment. We said, no, we've got to give them, what? Time. We've got to give them, what? Space. We can't put too much pressure on them because there's such resistance that they're up against. And so we sat back. The other side, after having been completely stunned by what happened in November 2008, fairly quickly regrouped. And they started their versions of the 88s with different things. These various attacks, these challenges. Was Barack Obama from the United States, or was he from a foreign country? Was he born in Hawaii or Kenya or other foreign countries? You know, what was this going on? What was actually happening? Was this reverse anti-white male racism that was now in power in the White House? And what about these union people? And then there's this crazy guy, Van Jones, and boom, 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 boom. And we watched as our generals dug in and refused to move out of Anzio. And we suffered the consequences. The initiative switched. We had between November 2008 and at the latest June 2009 to have delivered a devastating blow on the right. And see, one of the things about history is ruthless. It doesn't take any prisoners. If you miss that window, that's it. You've missed it. And history doesn't necessarily say, well, you're going to have another chance. You have to maybe wait a few months or a few years. I mean, there's a very famous example I often cite from France in the 1880s. There was a Napoleonic, a Bonapartist coup that was being planned. And the general that was to lead it was a guy named Boulanger. And the French right was mounting. They were ready to do it. And at the last minute, Boulanger blinked and didn't carry out the coup. And at that moment, the French right went into turmoil and was not able to fully recover until 1940 when Germany defeated France. Some 60 years later. History is not very tolerant of being overly cautious, of missing opportunities. And so the problem then is that when we sit back and simply say, well, our generals didn't give us the orders to march forward, there's a question, well, what the hell were you doing? Why were you sitting back waiting for the generals to give the orders? Why weren't you in the general's tent saying, General, the time is now. Rome is less than a day away from here. What are we waiting for, General? Yet we did. And I'm being very, very blunt about this, because I think we have to begin with some self-criticism. You know, I hear too many people saying, oh, Obama this, oh, Obama that, Obama let us down, Obama betrayed us. I was reading something from someone today about, I'm not going to vote for Obama because of what he's done in Haiti, etc. I'm not particularly fond of Obama. I mean, my attitude is that, you know, he's the leader of an empire that I vehemently oppose. On the other hand, I'm not going to sit back and say, oh, Obama this, oh, Obama that, when I know that progressive forces that knew better, and you can't say, well, this never happened before, because remember Bill Clinton, the guy that played the saxophone when he got in, right? And people gave him a complete pass. So it's not like we can say, well, no, I don't remember those days. That was too far back in the past. No. It's happened more recently. And we sat back and were patient. Patient is too nice a word. We were lethargic. Instead of putting the pressure on this administration and on the Democrats in office, we sat back. And we came up with wonderful excuses. I mean, we really did. I mean, there'll be awards at some point about this, right? So the excuses were, well, if we put too much pressure, it will discredit the president. If we put too much pressure, the other side will take advantage of this. Let's talk history, folks. If Martin Luther King had followed that kind of advice, we would have had a very different past, right? If A. Philip Randolph had followed that in 1941, right, there would have been no executive order to desegregate the war industry. I mean, we're forgetting history. The civil rights movement was fought under a Republican president in the modern civil rights movement. A Republican president followed by 2 Democrats. And when those 2 Democrats were in office, the leadership of the civil rights movement was often divided about how to approach those administrations, but King was never divided. King realized that the pressure from the masses had to go forward. Whether it was a Democrat or a Republican there, it wasn't about whether we had a friend in office. The question was whether the masses were going to put pressure on these elected leaders and insist that they do the right thing, not beg, right? I'm told I'm not supposed to say that, but I'm going to say it. It's wrong. It is wrong to sit back and to give more space. See, when I always love to tell this story, before Obama was elected, you know, I'd be doing some speeches and people would say, Bill, if Obama's elected, should we give him a honeymoon period? I say, absolutely. And they say, how long? I said, 24 hours. And everyone would laugh, right? And they think I was exaggerating. I'm not exaggerating a bit. Within 24 hours of his election, as I always say, two things happened immediately. He picked this right-wing Democrat from Chicago to be his chief of staff, right? And the second thing that he did was to start to float the name of Larry Summers to be his Treasury Secretary within the first 24 hours. So while we're partying, while we were celebrating, while we were talking about the great historic victory, right? Things were going on. What we have to understand is when we don't put the pressure, the other side does. And the other side isn't simply the Tea Party idiots. The other side are the people in Wall Street that were trying to figure out in this desperate collapse that contemporary capitalism was facing, who was going to save them and how it was going to be done. And they were putting pressure immediately on Obama. There was no question Obama wasn't going to pick Stiglitz or Krugman to be his Treasury secretaries. He was going to pick people that were in alignment with Wall Street unless we had been in the streets, unless in December and January, in this case of 2009, we had mounted demonstrations of the unemployed, demonstrations for jobs, demonstrations saying we want a different economy. That would have been the kind of pressure that would have made all the difference in the world, not listening to these wonderful speeches, not saying, oh my God, what a historic victory, but no, showing power, showing defiance, showing audacity, that it didn't matter whether he was an African American, except at a historical level. What mattered is what he was going to deliver for the masses of people in this country and around the world, and that was ultimately going to be dependent on what we decided to do or what we decided not to do. Now, I realize I'm stepping on toes. I do. And I always like to say, I'm sorry, but I have a plane in the morning, right? So I can get away with it. But we've got to begin with self-criticism. We really do. We have to understand, we have to ask ourselves, why did we let this happen? And then we have to start looking at, thinking about the way that we deal with politics and how we have to deal with it differently. And in that regard, let me just switch gears for a second and say something about what happened in December 2010 and its implications for us. Now, in November 2010, we all know what happened. We had the election, devastating results, no real surprises, but devastating results, demoralization among the electorate. And then in December 2010, not in the United States, but in a place called Tunisia, a very, very desperate individual set himself on fire. And that set in motion events that led to the overthrow of the tyrant, Ben Ali, and then set in motion what has now come to be called, in some cases, the Arab Spring, the Arab Democratic Uprising, the Arab Revolution. There's a number of names for it. But masses of people who had, up until that point, been described and demonized as passive, as trapped in the Middle Ages, all of a sudden were able to mobilize and carry out world historic events which I would argue potentially have in fact reshaped the way we look at politics on a global level. And shortly after that, not far from here, in the state of Wisconsin, there was the Madison Uprising. And that's what it was. I mean, had it not been for the Arabs, though, I don't think it would have happened. And I'm not saying that just to be funny. I'm saying that based on reports from various journalists who were interviewing people in Wisconsin and later in Ohio, asking them, why did they do this? Why? It's like sitting in, and I give it to people in Madison. I'm a boy from New York, and I was in Massachusetts. So I knew once upon a time what cold weather was. I live in exile right outside Washington now. But what people did in Wisconsin in the winter, I said, my God, right? This is serious. That we know if it hadn't been for the Arabs, what would have happened? What would happen is there would have been a massive demonstration that labor would have called. Would have ended roughly around 5 o'clock. Everyone would have then gone to the bar, right? Had at least 2 drinks and commiserate about how we just got our asses kicked, right? And then that would have been it. We'd start crying. But instead, people resisted. And then after that, we had this Occupy movement. And I, there's all kinds of criticisms one can make about Occupy movement. It's not perfect, whatever. I'm thrilled. I'm absolutely thrilled. And it's like just consider for a moment that before the Occupy movement, the only thing you heard on TV was about the Tea Party. I haven't heard anything about the Tea Party since then. Seriously, right? And it's like, it was just a Tea Party, and then Occupy, right? And what was really funny on one sense, and I wish we could sit back and really laugh at this, was the way that the media tried to deny the Occupy movement in the beginning. Ignore it, until it became something that they could simply not ignore, domestically and globally. It was marvelous, absolutely marvelous, and it put on a national agenda the issue of economic inequality in a way that had not been discussed in years. And there were a lot of groups that had been trying to move this issue, including organized labor for a while, but it had not caught on in the way that it did with Occupy. But there's some limitations, and I'm offering this constructively, that the discussion about inequality has focused largely on economic inequality, but it hasn't focused on racial and gender inequality. I mean, you see, there's the economic inequality which we've been seeing, which is greater than at any point since 1929. And there's something to be said about that, and we have to understand the roots of it. But what we also have to understand is the way racial and gender inequality are hardwired into the system and do not fundamentally depend on the business cycle. In other words, unemployment for African Americans and Latinos, just by way of example, is almost always double that of whites. And it's a fascinating thing to look at, because whether you're in a boom or a bust, it's double. There's something structural that's built in, and it's about this thing called racist oppression. And unfortunately, there's some in Occupy that aren't paying enough attention to the way that this structural issue of inequality, racial and gender inequality, intersects with the issue of economic inequality. And why that is important, was a number of reasons it's important. But one of the reasons is that there are among the right wing forces that will acknowledge economic inequality. They will talk about it. But you see, their solution is a bit different from ours. And the source of the problem, as far as they're concerned, is very different than we would identify. Right-wing populists will start going, particularly after financial crises, will start going Jew hunting. That's what they will do. You can set your watch to it. Jew hunting. They will, whether it's in Europe or North America, they will look for Jews whenever there's a financial crisis. Not just an economic crisis, a financial crisis. They will always start looking to hunt, identify, and point their finger at Jews and saying, you're the source of it. But the right wing in the United States doesn't stop at Jews. They start looking at African Americans. They start looking at immigrants. They start looking at women. And they build up this thing, and they don't, see, they're not constrained by the truth. So they basically can make use of any of these different targets. And they do this repeatedly. And so when we only talk about economic inequality, the problem is that you leave some space open. You see, it's sort of like when you don't completely cure a sore, the infection gets in, right? If you have TB and you stop taking the pills, the TB doesn't go away. And see, when we just talk about economic inequality, there's that opening that the right can use, whether it's Ron Paul or any of these other characters, Buchanan, and they can say, yes, there is an economic inequality, and the problem is And they may or may not use a Jewish name, but they might, that's the implication. Or the problem is these immigrants or whatever. So we've got to, as progressives, link this racial, gender, and economic inequality if we're going to ensure that we beat back the other side. And so that's my constructive criticism and suggestion to the Occupy movement. Because I think, at essence, it's a fabulous, fabulous movement. Now, let me just say one other thing in the interest of time, and that's about this problem of the fight for power. There are some on the left that think that we shouldn't be fighting for power. They have this idea that you fight for what you win without taking power. And basically what they mean is like you have demonstrations and other kinds of mass actions. And what I've been finding fascinating in looking at the responses around the world to a lot of the austerity programs that are being moved by the elites is that you are able to shut down countries, massive general strikes and demonstrations, hundreds of thousands of people, and the next day the elite says, thank you for your opinion. We're going to continue moving the way we want to move. So you see, the problem is that we've got to connect mass action with an actual fight for power. We've got to understand that as long as the reins of power are in the hands of the elite, they will use it. And they're going to increasingly use it in repressive ways. We're witnessing around the world an increase in authoritarianism. It is very scary, including under this first African-American president of the United States. Increased repression. You know, just some things that are just pretty scary. I mean, you know, he began by saying he was going to close down Guantanamo, and then that didn't quite happen. And then there's, you know, these drone attacks in Pakistan, and then there's other things, you know, just get me a little nervous. You know, I don't think I necessarily have enough sunscreen yet for Guantanamo. But you know, it's like you really start wondering at what point are more people going to get locked up or whacked? I mean, we're in a situation where the ruling elites are very, very nervous about the general environment. And therefore, the parameters for democratic discussion are narrowing. And in that situation, yes, mass action, yes, demonstrations, but we've got to be fighting for power. We've got to have an alternative vision. And ultimately, I would argue as a socialist, a social transformation, but at a minimum, some significant structural reforms that increase democracy at all levels, the political and economic. And that change the relationship between the United States and the rest of the world. Because one of the problems, you know, I was thinking when I was writing this, what I was going to deliver, I was thinking about FDR. And, you know, the way that many left and progressive people have, you know, almost canonized Roosevelt. You know, it's like, oh, he was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Well, Roosevelt did a number of things, and he did a number of very positive things, largely for two reasons. One was, in the face of his minimum program, the ultra-right pushed back, and in fact started contemplating a coup, a military coup against him in the mid-1930s. But the other thing was that there was pressure from social movements, from the unemployed, from labor, from the developing African-American movement, from Mexico, and from Chicanos in the Southwest. There was this pressure that was developing and pushing him. But even with that, FDR was the president during which a gentleman named Rafael Trujillo establishes authority in the Dominican Republic, becoming a scourge of Latin America, an incredible racist. FDR also turned Jews away from our borders who came here seeking asylum, knowing full well that they were going to be wiped out by the Nazis. He was reluctant at best to challenge race. And he got rid of Henry Wallace at the same time that he was advocating an economic Bill of Rights. We've got to understand who these people are, and we've got to understand that it's through pressure and our alternative politics and economic strategies that makes a difference, not depending on their best wishes. Which means that, yes, we find ourselves, until we are able to develop a sufficiently sized mass movement and a sufficiently strong level of organization, we always find ourselves every 4 years in the situation of the lesser of two evils. And I remember in my more ultra-left days as a young person, I used to just always talk about, I don't want to be in this lesser of two evils. Well, the only way you get out of the lesser of two evils situation is when you've built up sufficient independent strength that you can actually make a difference. Until that time, we actually face a problem. And in this election, the problem we face is the Emperor Augustus versus the Emperor Caligula. I mean, that's the reality. We are facing a situation where it's not like Obama is the great leader. If anyone wants a historical footnote on that, you can see me later. But it's not like we're facing in November a great leader of the progressive movement in whom we should put tremendous faith that dramatic things will change. No. What I think we should look at is that we don't want Caligula. We don't want the Caligula option. We do not want this growth and expansion of irrationalism at all levels of society. But even with that, the bottom line is that nothing will change until we are independently organizing and independently pressuring. Insofar as we continue to follow the orders of the generals, we will be demobilized. Our program will never come to fruition. It's only when we're in the general's tent and we basically say to the generals, we're not going to let you rest easy. We're not going to let you sit here. We're not going to let you do any more premature compromising. It's only then that we will get somewhere close to victory. And the stakes are tremendously high. Because you see, we're witnessing now this with the Occupy and all these other upsurges, something that's giving a lot of us enthusiasm. But if we don't tie it into a longer-term program, if we don't build organizations to take that and run with it, that movement exhausts itself. And when a progressive movement exhausts itself, then something else can happen. There can generally be a right-wing backlash. In 1919, summer of 1919, there were factory takeovers in Italy. Workers were mobilizing. Italy seemed like it was on the verge of collapsing as a capitalist state. The left couldn't get its act together. And 3 years later, there was a different kind of motion. It was called the March on Rome. And a former militant socialist by the name of one Benito Mussolini moved in and ushered in fascism. History is very unforgiving. We can't afford to lose and not learn the lessons of it. Thank you very much.